Welcome back to Mondays with Megan. Today we are going to be featuring a word. It's the last Monday of the month, and we're going to be talking about, in the vein of this subject, this concept that I brought up back in January as part of our efforts to learn how to communicate with radical leftists. Linguistic theft, which is, to put in colloquial terms, the redefinition of words with or without the acknowledgement that they are being redefined. So what we are talking about today, the word that I am going to be featuring is diversity, as in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the word is another one of those common words that we think we all know, right? We think, we've obviously heard this before. Mostly, I remember the first time I heard it was in biology class. We need biodiversity, right? This is the concept that the more diverse, the more varied in terms of life, in terms of species that an environment is, the more likely it is to thrive, and the lower the diversity is, the less likely it is to thrive. Diversity, just in normal parlance, means a variety or an assortment. There is something in also currently in the fifth edition of the American Heritage Dictionary of the English language, is the condition of having or including people from different ethnicities and social backgrounds. So this does include the definition that is currently being employed and deployed, which pretty much seems to functionally only include race. So I don't know if you've been to a diversity, equity, and inclusion training. If you are in the modern workforce, it would be hard for you to have escaped that at this point. For the most part, so I'd say 95 to 98% of the time is spent on re-traumatizing ourselves, retelling stories about slavery, the genocide of the Native Americans, and all of the ways that diversity has been stamped out in terms of race. So that is part of the definition of diversity. There's definitely nothing wrong with that. But the way, even in that vein, only focusing on the very narrow definition of diversity, the non-diverse definition of diversity, what it actually is very quickly becoming to mean is safe spaces for non-white people, in which white people are either not accepted or need to prove that they're safe by self-flagellation and hating themselves for being white. So, and I've asked the question, how will the self-hatred of white people end racism? And I've gotten either silence, eye rolls, accusations that I'm centering myself, or instructions to go educate myself. So none of those count as real answers to me. And one of the things that is definitely missing from the panoply that could be real diversity is the part where the definition says the condition of having or including people from different social backgrounds. So that is much broader than race. That has to do with socioeconomic status. That has to do with ability or disability. That has to do with gender. That has to do with religion. It has to do with very much more than just race. However, the idea that anything but race should be included in the discussions or trainings or indoctrination about diversity is often met, again, with what I had said before about silencing or accusations of me centering myself or me not really getting it, or just anything that has to do with anything other than race. Is, if it comes from a white person, such as myself, it's immediately dismissed as racist, implicitly or explicitly. So that actually would not be diversity. That actually also wouldn't be inclusion, because diversity, even if you're just focusing on race, by definition, would include Caucasian people. So this idea that in diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings, we are actively and unapologetically excluding an entire race of people, of which there are millions across the world, is decidedly not diversity. So it's one of those bait and switch words. Because of course, if you're a good person in the 21st century, you wouldn't be against diversity. Of course not. But in order to be for diversity, you more and more have to be against white people, which is not being for diversity at all. So the real diversity, equity, inclusion idea would be closer to what Martin Luther King had said, which is that all races be treated as equal, not we have to, it's phrased as we have to lift up others who, are starting at a disadvantage or whatever. But functionally, what it looks like is beating down everyone, including the people in whose name they are trying to or claiming to raise people up. Now, I'm not saying that racism is not a thing, and I'm not saying that there are spaces in which diversity does not exist. I don't know if this is still true, but even up to a few years ago, statistics said that the most segregated hour in America is Sunday morning. Now, I also want to be careful, though, because I think people should be able to choose where they want to go. Do they want to go to a Black church? Do they want to go to a white church? Do they want to go to a diverse church? Do they want to go to a Spanish-speaking church? Whatever. So, that's all fine and good. We don't need to force people to, interact in settings, especially in church settings, where they don't feel comfortable. I would argue that the church is actually not about comfort at all, but that's a theological discussion, which we don't necessarily need to get into. But again, if you do have questions on theology, I have a degree in theology, which permits me to tell God what to do. So please let me know how you would like me to use that on your behalf. Anyway, so when you hear the word diversity in the vein of how to talk to leftists, you need to basically, in your mind, replace it with non-white uplift. And uplift, of course, is definitely a word from the progressive era, and it's not really super used so much now. The word now is empowerment, but I use the word uplift on purpose because it does have that. The reason that word was rejected wholesale, for the most part, of the civil rights movement and beyond, is because it just had this very patronizing quality to it. And I think what's going on now in the diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings, aside from demanding that white people submit to verbal and emotional abuse in order to prove that they're good white people and they're not racist, which there will never be enough of proving that you're not racist, of course. And not racist is different than anti-racist. We're going to talk about anti-racist as a word next month. But it's become a very sort of patronizing, the effect that this new meaning of diversity has had on white people is, I've just seen a lot of patronizing from white people, actually, because they want to prove that they are good white people. So they just say, oh yeah, oh, my ancestors were awful, oh, and I bear the sins of my ancestors, and oh yeah, whiteness is just, oh, it's just obnoxious, it needs to be obliterated, it needs to be abolished, or just, oh yeah, I really learned a lot today. And we've been turned into these automaton zombies that are basically just there to affirm how awful whiteness and white people are. And that is part of what diversity now systemically means, in not just in colloquial language, but in actual trainings that are required for people to keep their jobs. So, what I do when the word diversity comes up is I start talking about ways in which I can be included, even though I'm white. So, and some of the these would be different for everybody. But and it's not just like, oh, I'm always going to be diverse if I'm a woman. No, if you're in a room full of women, that's not going to have much gender diversity now, is it? It's not always bad. In fact, I would advocate for women having safe spaces all over the place. They used to be called women's restrooms. Anyway, and maybe if you're in a support group with people with disabilities, that's not going to be diverse for you. But it's when we get everybody together who's, in whatever training or thing they're in, that we need to bring up that it's actually not just about race. It's not just about race. If we want true diversity, we want a variety or assortment of ethnic and social backgrounds. And so I just kind of gently say like, oh yeah, I really appreciate the diversity in the abilities in the room, or the genders in the room, or, which I believe there are only 2 PS, but this is about the monolith that is the diversity as non-white races being represented in a particular space. So that might be obvious to some people, but I think it's really snuck in there, and it's snuck in there pretty quick. So a lot of this stuff is moving very, very quickly, which is one of the reasons why we're focusing on it. So anyway, at our next feature, we are going to be talking about anti-racism. Like I said, that will be at the end of next month, the month of May. And otherwise, we will see you. I have I'm trying to mention this at every video, so obviously I'm not very great at it yet, even though we're 4 months in. So I just because I'm what looks like slamming the left in all these videos, there are things I still agree with on the left. So I started a newsletter called What the Left Gets Right, and you can find it, as well as some other subscription levels for various topics, such as how to or pursuing mental health in a globalization age, and how to do research in the age of big censorship. And you can find all of that, as well as my other writings, and my book that comes out next month, which is in like a week or less. So that book is called Bowed as If Laden with Snow. I probably haven't mentioned that yet because I'm not real great at self-promotion. It's a full-length poetry collection, and many of you have pre-ordered it already. I really appreciate that. I know poetry is not everybody's thing, so I appreciate those of you who are trying to make it somewhat your thing because you care about me. You can find out more about that on my website and in my newsletter as well, meganwildhood.com. And I will see you all next week for the first Monday of the month of May on Mondays with Megan. Okay, bye.